Hello everyone and welcome back to Creature Archives. Today we're continuing our new series Evolved Fiction. In this series, I take iconic creatures from movies, myths, and games and reimagine them through the lens of real-world evolution and biology. What if these creatures actually evolved on Earth? What would they look like? How would they survive, reproduce, and interact with the ecosystems around them? Let's dive in and find out. In today's episode, we're taking a look at one of the most unique and biologically bizarre Pokemon ever created, Venusaur. This remarkable creature represents the final stage of a three-part evolutionary line that begins with Bulbasaur, continues with Ivysaur, and culminates in this frog-like behemoth with a massive blooming flower growing out of its back. Venusaur isn't just iconic, it's weird in all the best ways. It's one of the few Pokemon that fully blends animal and plant into a symbiotic relationship, presenting a challenge that feels almost tailor-made for speculative evolution. But before we start imagining how something like this could exist in our world, let's break down what we know about the Venusaur evolutionary line, because identifying its defining features is the first step to reimagining it in a scientifically grounded way. We'll start with Bulbasaur, a squat toad-like quadruped that is instantly recognizable thanks to the plant bulb growing on its back. According to the Pokédex, this bulb allows it to absorb sunlight and store energy through photosynthesis. It's a creature that doesn't need to eat often and prefers sunlit meadows and forests. As it evolves into Ivysaur, that bulb begins to grow into a budding flower. Ivysaur becomes stronger, more muscular, and actively seeks out sunlight to fuel its final transformation. And when it finally becomes Venusaur, the transformation is dramatic. The flower is in full bloom, spreading wide green leaves and releasing a calming aroma that affects both people and Pokemon nearby. Venusaur is now a large, lumbering beast, both powerful and symbiotic, somehow fusing animal strength with plant energy. So, how could something like this ever evolve in the real world? And how would such a strange relationship even work biologically? Let's find out. Now that we've reviewed the Venusaur evolutionary line, it's time to address the big biological challenges before we can bring this plant-animal hybrid into a plausible evolutionary reality. First and most obvious, Venusaur isn't just a big animal, it's a walking ecosystem, a vertebrate that appears to host a living, blooming, flowering plant on its back. This is incredibly rare in nature. Vertebrate animals have immune systems that reject foreign organisms. Plants need soil, water, light, and nutrients, especially nitrogen and phosphorus, to survive. So how do we explain this? To tackle this, we'll need to break Venusaur into two parts, animal and plant, and explore how the relationship could have co-evolved. Let's start with the animal half. Venusaur's squat body, warty green skin, large mouth, and powerful limbs all point to an amphibian, perhaps something similar to a giant toad. And at first glance, that would make sense. Frogs and toads are known for their moisture-loving lifestyles, strong legs, and connection to lush environments, things Venusaur would likely need too. But there's a big problem with this idea. Venusaur is quite large, standing up to 6 feet tall. And while there have been large amphibians in Earth's history, like the Triassic period Mastodontosaurus or the late Cretaceous Beelzebufo, nearly all of them were aquatic or semi-aquatic carnivores. A fully terrestrial amphibian of Venusaur size is extremely rare, and when you also consider that Venusaur is likely herbivorous, the amphibian theory becomes much harder to justify. Now, a quick side note. Some have argued that Venusaur might be carnivorous. Its body shape is reminiscent of a Pac-Man frog, wide-mouthed and low to the ground. And certain Pokédex entries mention that the scent of its flower attracts other Pokemon, which could hint at ambush predation. And while that's an interesting theory, the evidence still leans more heavily towards herbivory or at least omnivory. We see multiple indicators of this in Venusaur's behavior and ecology. It prefers sunny environments, is portrayed as a calm and peaceful creature, and maintains a symbiotic relationship with a flowering plant, suggesting a more sedentary, nutrient-sharing lifestyle rather than one built around active hunting. Its Pokédex entries describe it basking in sunlight to help its flower grow, which is far more consistent with grazing animals than predators. Not to mention, in the anime, Bulbasaur is shown eating fruit on multiple occasions, further supporting an herbivorous or at least an omnivorous diet. Herbivory among amphibians is virtually unheard of outside of a few tadpole species and some obscure exceptions, and certainly never at this size or level of specialization. So, if Venusaur isn't an amphibian, what is it? Well, if amphibians are too limited in size, diet, and life cycle, the next most realistic candidate are reptiles, specifically ancient terrestrial herbivores. One group that came to mind early in this process was the pariasaurs, a stocky, armored lineage of reptiles from the Permian period. They had bulky bodies, herbivorous diets, and sprawling limbs, traits that align surprisingly well with Venusaur's posture and gait. However, there's a critical problem with Venusaur being a pariasaur: timing. You see, Venusaur's back isn't just carrying a tree or a shrub, it is very clearly supporting a flowering plant. And flowering plants, or angiosperms, didn't evolve until the early Cretaceous, about 200 million years after pariasaurs went extinct. So, while they look the part, pariasaurs are simply too early in the timeline to have co-evolved with flowering plants. Luckily, in the early Cretaceous, a more suitable group emerges, the Notasuchians. Notasuchians were a diverse and fascinating group of ancient crocodiliiforms. But unlike modern crocodiles, many Notasuchians were fully terrestrial and had body proportions that line up shockingly well with Venusaur. Even better, some were herbivorous or omnivorous, with teeth adapted for grinding plant material and robust limbs for supporting their body on land. Certain species like Symbiotic had broad, almost toad-like skulls, squat frames, and may have even lived in forested environments. Exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find a creature like Venusaur basking in sunlight and supporting a living flower. So, rather than being a giant mutant frog, a real-world Venusaur would more likely descend from a lineage of plant-eating reptiles like the Notasuchians, evolving size, bulk, and behavioral adaptations that thrive in a plant-rich, sun-drenched ecosystem. This sets the foundation for a creature that could plausibly support a flowering plant on its back, not through amphibian traits, but through reptilian innovations. But even with that animal base in place, the question still stands: how does a flowering plant live on an animal's back? What keeps it alive without soil or roots in the ground? In the Pokemon world, Bulbasaur is specifically said to have the seed planted on its back shortly after birth. This tells us that the plant is a separate organism entirely, not a growth, tumor, or extension of the animal's own body. But in the real world, that presents a serious biological challenge. Flowering plants rely on soil to anchor their roots and draw in essential nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The surface of an animal, especially one that moves, sheds skin, and regulates its own immune system, is far from the ideal environment for a plant to grow. So how does the plant survive? What anchors it? What feeds it? Well, the answer to this puzzle doesn't come from animals or plants at all. It lies in a third surprise symbiotic partner: fungi. In nature, fungi play a crucial role in bridging the gap between living systems. In lichens, fungi form symbiotic partners with algae or cyanobacteria, allowing both to thrive in nutrient-poor environments like on rocks. In forest, mycorrhizal fungi form networks that connect tree roots, facilitating nutrient and chemical exchange. Now imagine a fungus evolving to live between the plant and animal, a biological interface. Here's how it might work. When a Bulbasaur is born, it's inoculated with a symbiotic fungus, perhaps passed on through close contact with its mother during early nurturing behaviors, like cuddling or resting against her back. This fungus quickly colonizes the newborn skin, forming a sticky, nutrient-rich layer called a biofilm. This biofilm acts like a living soil substitute, allowing a seed carefully planted by the parent from her own flowering structure to take root and begin growing. From there, the fungus acts as a nutrient middleman, pulling nitrogen, urea, and minerals from the animal's skin and bloodstream and feeding them to the plant. In exchange, the plant photosynthesizes and produces sugars and oxygen, which are cycled back through the fungus to benefit the host. It's a three-way symbiosis: animal, plant, and fungus, each one supporting the others. Over time, evolution would favor individuals where this bond is mutualistic, stable, and efficient. Before we move on to what Venusaur might actually look like in a functioning real-world ecosystem, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to keep up with the rest of the Evolved Fiction series. And if you're into content like this and love to read, check out my bookstore linked in the description below. I've included a variety of books that I personally recommend. Also, if you're interested in making content like this yourself, I've linked a few resources I recommend to help get you started. Any purchases made through these links help support the channel, so thank you in advance. Thanks so much for watching. Now let's get back to the video. While the Pokédex lists Venusaur's weight at just 220 pounds, this figure is drastically underestimated when considering the creature's anatomy. Being a condensed quadruped standing over 6 feet tall with a massive flowering plant growing from its back, a real-world Venusaur would likely weigh between 800 and 1,200 pounds. This weight range better reflects the dense musculature, reinforced skeletal structure, and the added mass of its symbiotic plant. Its body would resemble that of a semi-sprawling quadruped. Limbs would be thick and powerfully muscled, set beneath the body for structural support, a necessity for carrying both its own bulk and the botanical load it carries. The torso would be broad and barrel-shaped, supporting a reinforced dorsal region where the plant is anchored. This region would feature fused vertebrae and enlarged muscle attachments to stabilize the load and dampen shock from movement. Unlike most reptiles, Venusaur's spinal column and hips would be adapted for dynamic load distribution, enabling it to shift weight as the plant grows. Its feet would be wide with padded soles, ideal for supporting weight on soft forest floors, equipped with clawed digits for traction and digging shallow soil beds to rest and absorb nutrients more efficiently. The defining feature of Venusaur is, of course, the massive flowering plant anchored to its back. Realistically, this wouldn't be a superficial growth, but a deeply integrated symbiotic partner, complete with vascular and neurological connections. Early in life, a seed is planted on the juvenile's back by its parent. From there, it forms a mutualistic interface mediated by the specialized fungus it also inherited from its mother. which colonizes the dermis and facilitates root adhesion. Over time, vascular grafts develop at the interface, essentially a plant-animal circulatory bridge. Through this connection, Venusaur can supply water, nitrogen, and phosphates to the plant, while in return receiving secondary metabolites like sugars and oxygen-rich compounds from photosynthesis. To support this system, Venusaur's anatomy likely includes specialized capillary beds, dermal gland complexes, and even root-housing tissues embedded in its back, similar to how some lichens and coral structures host photosynthetic algae. As a large herbivore, Venusaur would possess an elongated digestive tract with fermentation chambers, much like those in iguanas or herbivorous turtles. Gut flora would break down cellulose and complex plant materials, producing fatty acids and nutrients for both Venusaur and its symbiotic plant. Its teeth would be broad and well adapted for grinding fibrous vegetation. Strong jaw musculature and mobile lips would help it crop leaves and manipulate plant matter efficiently. A wide muscular tongue might assist in food processing and in collecting fruits or nectar from its own flower, recycling the byproducts of its symbiotic partner. Venusaur's brain would be adapted not only for processing visual and olfactory stimuli, but also for monitoring the condition of its symbiotic plant. Specialized nerve clusters may develop around the root interface, forming a neurovascular feedback system. These could allow the animal to sense when the plant is damaged, dehydrated, or flowering, enabling it to adjust behavior accordingly. Olfactory bulbs would be especially developed, helping it locate flowering plants, water sources, or other Venusaur individuals. A Jacobson's organ would provide chemosensory feedback for environmental scanning and possibly even plant-to-plant communication. In the end, a biologically plausible Venusaur would be a marvel of co-evolved anatomy. Its body is not just a vessel for locomotion or digestion, but a complex platform designed to support, nourish, and protect a living floral partner. Every element, from the bones in its spine to the microbial film on its back, plays a role in maintaining this ancient and elegant alliance. Far more than a monster with a flower, this Venusaur is a living fusion of three kingdoms: Animalia, Plantae, and fungi, wrapped in a single majestic organism. In contrast to Charizard, which may have feasibly persisted past the KT extinction due to its flight, fire, and opportunistic carnivory, a real-world Venusaur would have most likely lived and died in the late Cretaceous. The asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs caused a global environmental catastrophe: fires, a nuclear winter that dropped the Earth's temperatures, acid rain, and the collapse of photosynthesis. For a creature like Venusaur, deeply dependent on solar energy, a symbiotic flowering plant, and stable forest ecosystems, this would be a death sentence. Its sedentary lifestyle, large body mass, herbivorous diet, and dependence on a plant partner make it the exact type of organism that extinction events tend to wipe out first. Venusaur couldn't simply migrate, hibernate, or switch to a carnivorous diet like some smaller generalists might be able to. Realistically, Venusaur's highly specialized anatomy and tight ecological niche would make it extremely vulnerable to sudden ecosystem collapse, and unfortunately, that's exactly what happened during the KT extinction. This doesn't mean we can't explore what its life in the Cretaceous would have been like. During the late Cretaceous, Venusaur likely inhabited humid subtropical floodplains and forests, lush environments rich in cycads, ferns, and early flowering plants. These areas provided both the sunlight needed for photosynthesis and nutrient-rich soils where the symbiotic plant could flourish. In this world, Venusaur would be a keystone species in the Cretaceous world. Its plant would offer nectar or edible petals to attract animals like prehistoric bees, birds, or even small gliding mammals, essentially turning Venusaur into a pollinator hub on legs. Its dung would fertilize the land, its resting spots would shape vegetation growth, and its presence in an area might influence the behavior of entire ecosystems. Reproduction in Venusaur involves two interlinked processes: the biological reproduction of the animal and the sexual reproduction of its symbiotic plant. These flowers would bloom and reproduce primarily during the rainy season, when increased humidity and nutrient availability make conditions ideal. As the flowers open, their fragrance is carried on the moist air, drawing other Venusaurs from afar. This shared blooming period also promotes cross-pollination between individuals, synchronizing mating activity with botanical fertility. During courtship, individuals might engage in flower dueling, posturing, circling, and flaring their plant blooms to show off its vibrancy and health. These displays serve a dual purpose: one, to attract mates through visible indicators of vitality and genetic quality, and two, enabling plant cross-pollination when two flowering Venusaurs come into close contact. In this way, Venusaur's mating rituals are both sexual and botanical, with reproductive success dependent on both the animal's health and the flourishing of its symbiotic plant. After fertilization, a female Venusaur likely seeks out a sunlit, vegetated area to give birth, providing warmth, shelter, and plenty of light for the developing seedling. Like their reptilian ancestors, Venusaurs lay eggs rather than giving live birth. They typically lay between 3 and 6 eggs, carefully digging shallow nests into the soil with their powerful forelimbs to create a soft, warm bed. Once laid, the mother lowers herself atop the clutch, partially burying her body so that only her blooming flower and leafy crown remain visible, camouflaging her presence while she incubates the eggs. During this incubation period, she remains largely stationary, living off stored fat reserves and the metabolic support provided by her symbiotic plant. Photosynthesis from the flower supplements her energy needs, allowing her to conserve strength while staying alert for potential threats. She maintains this protective posture until the eggs hatch, ensuring the next generation has the best possible start. Shortly after hatching, the mother plants a seed from her own symbiotic flower onto each newborn's back. At the same time, the infants are inoculated with a specialized fungus transferred through grooming or close contact. This fungus colonizes their skin, forming a sticky, nutrient-rich biofilm that anchors the seed and initiates photosynthesis. Juvenile Bulbasaurs stay with their mothers for the first year of life, not only for protection, but also to receive essential fungal spores and beneficial skin flora. Through nuzzling, basking, and grooming, they maintain this biofilm and support the early development of their plant partner. Much like crocodilian hatchlings, they benefit from extended parental care, learning to forage, follow sunlight, and gradually develop their flower into a fully functional photosynthetic organ. Despite its size and robust frame, a real-world Venusaur wouldn't be without threats. In the predator-rich ecosystems of the late Cretaceous, even massive herbivores had to contend with apex carnivores and interspecies competition. Yet, Venusaur's unique biology gives it tools beyond brute strength, blending toxicity, camouflage, and community to survive. At 6 feet tall and between 800 and 1,200 pounds, Venusaur has a respectable size by modern standards, but it would be dwarfed by the mega herbivores of its time. While ankylosaurs, hadrosaurs, and ceratopsians could reach weights in the multi-ton range, Venusaur would be more comparable to a modern-day bison. This made it large enough to deter small predators, but small enough to remain a viable target for larger carnivores. Predators like dromaeosaurs would hunt smaller, weakened individuals, while megatheropods like tyrannosaurs would easily be able to kill an adult Venusaur. That is, they could if Venusaur was defenseless. However, it was far from it. One of its most powerful deterrents lies in the very symbol of its identity, the massive flower blooming from its back. Far from just ornamental, this flower is highly toxic, packed with alkaloids, cardiac glycosides, or similar bioactive compounds that make it poisonous to consume. Any creature foolish enough to bite down on the bloom risks nausea, paralysis, or even death. Most predators have learned quickly to recognize Venusaur's scent and coloration, treating it with the same caution modern animals reserve for poison dart frogs or monarch butterflies. This floral defense, however, is not yet fully developed in Bulbasaurs. The juvenile stage lacks the full potency of the adult's toxins, making them significantly more vulnerable to predation. This is another major reason why maternal protection during the first year is critical. Until the plant matures and develops its chemical arsenal, Bulbasaur must rely on proximity to its mother and her fully armed bloom for safety. When a predator approaches, Bulbasaurs will hide beneath their mother, who will hunker down atop of them, entering a defensive stance. In addition to chemical deterrence, Venusaur employs camouflage and behavioral deception. With their powerful sense of smell enhanced by enlarged olfactory bulbs and a Jacobson's organ, they can often detect approaching predators long before visual contact is made. When threatened, Venusaur will hunker down against the forest floor, partially burying itself in leaf litter or soft soil, with limbs tucked beneath its bulk, making it virtually indistinguishable from a flowering bush or forest shrub to most predators. Venusaur was part of a diverse late Cretaceous ecosystem filled with other large herbivores competing for food, water, and territory. These included ankylosaurs, hadrosaurs, and ceratopsians, each with their own feeding strategies and preferred plants. To reduce direct competition, Venusaur likely relied on its powerful front limbs to dig for roots and access low-ground vegetation that other herbivores might overlook. Additionally, the symbiotic plant on its back provides supplemental nutrition through photosynthesis, giving Venusaur an extra edge in nutrient intake. Venusaur would have been a vital component of its ecosystem. With its unique blend of animal, plant, and fungus acting as a mobile pollinator hub, it would have helped sustain populations of prehistoric insects and small animals dependent on its flowers. Its foraging and digging behaviors would have shaped plant communities by promoting soil turnover and nutrient cycling. Additionally, its dung would have enriched the soil, supporting the lush floodplain vegetation. In this way, Venusaur would have been more than just a herbivore. It would have functioned as a keystone species, influencing the structure and health of its environment and helping maintain the delicate balance of the late Cretaceous subtropical forest. Thanks for watching this episode of Evolved Fiction. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss any future content. And let me know down below what kind of videos you'd like to see in the future. And a special shout out to our channel members. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time, stay curious, and I'll see you all in the next video.